I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day. I'll be seeing you in everything that's light and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you.
We are thrilled to have Liz and Mitch Scott as the recipients of the Community Service Award for 2007. Shepherd Center Board of Trustees picked Liz and Mitch because of their combined ability in all the areas that we hold as the key purposes of Shepherd Center. They are examples of lifelong learning, service to others, and spiritual growth. The importance of picking them as a couple is to tell their story and for each of us to learn to be better people using our own talents, but from their example.
Lewisburg is really a delightful town, and because there are a lot of shakers and movers like Mitch and Liz that have kept it such a nice place. They couldn't have done it by themselves, but they sure did more than their share.
Liz came to our very early meetings in the formation of Shepherd Center in 1999. She is such an encourager of others. Hearing the message of Adventures in Learning and the opportunities to have classes in multiple areas, she helped us continue the passion and drive that it takes to form a new service to others. Mitch has joined in several projects and is such a great sharer of history, but it's just magical to have a couple with this many years of history together and sharing their love for this valley with so many.
Have I told you lately that I love you? Could I tell you once again somehow? Have I told with all my heart and soul how I adore you Well, darling, I'm telling you now, this heart would break in two if you refuse me. I'm no good without you anyhow. Dear, have I told you lately that I love you? Well, darling, I'm telling you now.
My dad was native of Giles County, Virginia. That's where he spent the first 18 years of his life. He came back after the war, and I think he worked in the bank over in Pearisburg, and he had a buddy that was already down to First National, and the buddy told him, you know, Paul makes a good man, and so he came to Rochford in 1919. Mom came 600 miles from Lewisburg, Tennessee to Rochford and taught first grade in Rochford. A couple of people still alive today that went to school to her, but she quit to be the housewife, and she never did go back to work again. Dad worked two jobs. He worked at the bank. He was there 18 years at first, and then he was at altogether 61 years in Rochford Bank. And so when he wasn't working at the bank, he was selling insurance. I was an only child, but as soon as I found out how this conceiving notion worked, I asked him for a brother, and they didn't pay attention to me. At 4 years of age, going on 5, I entered kindergarten at Rochford, and I think the first day the principal broke the yardstick on me. I had ambitions of being good, but I seemed to get diverted at times. They decided to have a motto, every child a gift, every child a stocking, or something like that. And they would put fruit and nuts and cheap toys and candy and apples, candy canes into this mesh stocking. There was no discrimination on the stockings whatsoever. So I remember pleading with my folks to go get my stocking. You know, a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, he can't understand he can't have a stocking just because his daddy could buy him one. So some of the Rotarians got to pop and said, hey, this is every child. There is no differentiation. So I got my stocking.
Back in the late 20s, my father came from Danville, Kentucky to take a job at GMS. But his first trip to take a job in West Virginia was a few years earlier, and he rode the train from Danville, Kentucky to Logan, and it was the time of the mine wars. And Dad did not come from a wealthy family, and he had on his one white shirt and his jodhpurs and his one pair of leather boots. And when they pulled into the station in Logan, he looked out the window and all he could see were armed men. And he thought, this is not the place I want to be. I know it's not the place I want to be. But the train stopped and he got off. He was the only one that got off. And there was a gentleman on a mule standing back behind the station that Dad saw, and he pointed to him and said, come on. So Dad got on back behind the station, and the man said, here, put this jacket on because somebody's going to shoot you right away. They'll think you're a mine owner because you have a white shirt on. So he put the jacket on and rode out of town very slowly on the other mule. And he said, right then I decided that I wasn't going to take this job in Logan. This was not where I was going to be. He came back to the station and got on the train very quiet and went right back to Kentucky. And then when there was an offering of a job at GMS, he took that, and he
just had a marvelous time there. Then Dad left the GMS and met my mother, and she was a teacher also. And he became principal of the high school, and they married, had my sister Ann, and she was Sis and Mother was Sister. Every lady in Dad's family's name was Sister, and I was Sissy. I was born on August 12, 1932, in Lewisburg at Mrs. Dotson's maternity home, and my sister was born there also. We stayed here in Lewisburg until I guess I was about 6 years old, and we moved to Baltimore, and Dad took a job with the Federal Land Bank. And oh, I loved Baltimore. You could go skating, ice skating, you could go to plays, you could go to the museum, and you could go to movies for 12 cents. Triple feature on Saturday morning, and that was a big deal. But the one thing I remember was in the first grade, and I had a very good friend named Lilybeth, and Lilybeth talked a great deal, and she had a personality of her own. And she was out in the hall getting a drink of water and stood and talked to some other people. And the teacher said, Lilybeth, you'll have to take your chair and sit in the closet now because you're being disciplined. And Lilybeth went in and sat down, and I thought to myself, you know, if she's going to sit in there, I might as well go sit there too, and we can talk to each other. So I took my chair and went in the closet, and the teacher said, why are you doing that? And I said, well, if she's going to be in there, I might as well be there too. She's my friend. So we spent the afternoon in the coat closet. And nothing was as great as that. And then we returned to Lewisburg when I was in, I guess, the 6th grade.
Every Saturday afternoon matinee, I paid my 12 cents to go see a doubleheader at the Grand Theater. And so you'd go in there, you know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you'd come out about 4, and the sun would be bearing down, and I instantly got a splitting headache. And I did that once too often. I went downtown, and the place was teeming with people. And it hit me like the light bulb coming on in a comic strip that this is where the action is. Here's everybody that I ever want to know, right out here on the street. So I never went back to the movies on Saturday matinees anymore after that. It was really a great feeling to have been born in this fantastic town where I felt like I knew everybody. I felt like I could go in anybody's home. If they had something to eat, you know, they'd offer me something. And of course, the Armory was built about 2 years before I was born, 1926. So there was a lot of activity around there. Awful lot of teenage boys were in that National Guard. On January 1941, almost 12 months before Pearl Harbor, they marched that whole unit off to Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Every one of those boys marched off to war.
This is a fairly remote area, but here we had a big Army hospital, and we had a prisoner of war camp. And so it brought the war home.
We lived in the big house on the front of Washington Street, and we had a tourist home, and there were 5 or 6 tourist homes on Washington Street.
Her father worked for the government. He had to commute.
She was raised on taking care of the tourists and doing their beds and helping around.
I can make a bed up so fast, it can have a person in it, and I can still make it up.
Almost every Sunday when the hospital was established, they would have some of the wounded soldiers over for Sunday dinner every Sunday. And her Girl Scout leader happened to be one of the leaders of the local Red Cross. And she had the Girl Scout troop there 1 day a week rolling bandages.
There were an awful lot of salesmen who drove to Lewisburg. And my mother was a very kindly mother. And she would see if they were tired or something. And she'd say, oh, come on back in the dining room or the kitchen and give you some coffee and something. And then during the week of commencement at the 2 schools, we always had a house full of family.
Greenbrier High, which I really love, didn't offer high-tech courses, and I wanted to go into engineering, I thought. And my parents made the decision to send me as a day student, we call them town boy, to GMS. I'd been in a band in high school, played the drum, as it were, and so then I got in the band my second year at GMS, and we went, on tours like the Apple Blossom Festival up at Winchester and that sort of thing.
Then I went to 5 years at the Greenbrier College as a day student. I got a superb education at Greenbrier. Oh, it was a haven. It was a haven for intelligent women who were ahead of their times because they were ready to go out in the world and get a job. And back then, the world wasn't ready for them. It was really a man's world. But they got a very fine education in business and accounting, history, the arts, and they were prepared to go out in the world and hold a job. And the most delightful women, oh, they were so nice. And they all had something about them that made you look at them and say, hey, you are going to go someplace in this world. And the boys, I think, was the same way, but I think there was also an influence of the military, that these young men could be trained to go into the military, sometimes as an officer and sometimes not, but that this background of ROTC, that they'd have initiated a program of self-development for them. And they were so handsome. Oh, on Sunday nights, the whole corps had to go to Old Stone Church, all 500 of them. And we all smiled and flirted and had the best time. It was a good time.
Virginia Tech is called a military college, and you were required to be in the Corps. And I was in the band. They had the drums all taken care of, so they gave me the cymbals, which is probably about the smartest thing they did. It was a very rigid thing. You went home, you went on leave, just like in the Marine. And you had to have your grades up to even go home. So I didn't get home very often. Then I would hitchhike home. A friend of mine, very good friend from Ronsford, he arranged a date for me up there in the country at Frankfort. And on the way to the date, I wrecked a car, which was brand new. So that was a little rough. And then we went on the blind date. It was still drivable. We went on the blind date, and the blind date was Sissy Johnson.
Well, now that's when I was in college at Greenbrier College.
She was 16, and I was probably pushing 20.
I was taken to Virginia Tech by his mother and father. Of course, the cadets couldn't sit with you during the game, so all you got to do was say hello and goodbye during halftime. So that didn't do much for me. But then he came on home because it was Thanksgiving break, and that was wonderful. And we had a really good time. And I think he looked at me and I looked at him and said, well, some other time. I could have gone to Center College, which is in Kentucky, where my sister and Dad and everybody had gone. But I was kind of rebellious, I didn't want to do what everybody else had done. So I thought I'd try Maryland. I didn't really choose home economics. I fell into it because that's where the retail and merchandising was in. And that was kind of a horrible experience because I'd never sewed in my life. I had cooked a little bit, but I had to take the beginning sewing and the beginning cooking before I could get to the retail classes. And I loved the University of Maryland and the football team and the basketball team. And when you're at a huge university of 40,000 people. Somewhere along the way you have to find a group that you fit into. And they hadn't started any regular basketball games for women. But we played basketball and we loved it. It was wonderful.
You know, it's almost precise date we graduated. I think about maybe 5 days later, the North Koreans invaded South Korea. So here we are, all second lieutenants, you know. So it was automatic that we would be in the service.
Many of you who are young people will serve in the armed forces of your country. Nothing you will do later in life will be of greater benefit to your homes, your communities, or your friends.
Well, I was in the Army, ROTC, and my buddy was in the infantry, and we decided we wanted to fly jets, and so we joined the Air Force. We went down and bought uniforms. They give you an allowance for that. So we bought the Air Force blue uniform and put it on and wore it down the road to Dallas. We were about 60 miles north. Wore it down to Dallas, checked into a free bag hotel and left my little Studebaker in a parking area. No, I left on the street. And we came back the next day and it had been absolutely stripped. So the only thing we lucked out on was we wore the uniform, because we wouldn't have had anything to report in, when we went back off the weekend. Trained me out. We went to Houston, which is Ellington, and then we went to Mather, which is at Sacramento, and we went through bombardier school there. So we were dual rated. We had a bombardier rating and a navigator rating. Then we went from there to Langley to combat crew training. We shot up the island over there on the eastern shore. And then we went from there to survival training in Reno with about 4 feet of snow, and from there to Korea. And arrived in Korea basically New Year's Day, 1953. Now the plane that we flew, we had trained in at Langley. The B-26 that we flew in Korea was just 2 engines, but by the time we loaded the wings up with all the bombs and in the inside, we were carrying a heavier load than the B-17. We only flew at night, no lights. We would watch for the lights coming down the road and zero in on those and bomb the trucks that are bringing the supplies. And we did that all night, every night. They had 1 million nukes that repaired the roads. So as soon as we got done bombing, they turned those loose and they had the roads passable the next day.
He won the Distinguished Flying Cross. That's for extraordinary achievement in flight or for surviving your tour of duty.
We had our choice when we'd flown the 50 missions about what division of the Air Force we'd go into. So I talked 2 of my buddies into going with MATS. At the time, this was the largest transport plane in the Air Force. It would carry 200 troops. It would also carry a D-8 Caterpillar, and they'd just drive it on board. And when we landed this plane, at the time of rollout to land, you probably were about 50 feet in the air.
Oh, I had a humdinger of a job. I worked for Hochul Kohn department store, and I worked in their little training program to be a manager, and I worked Thanksgiving to Christmas, 6 days a week, 10 or 12 hours a day, and I brought home $37.45. Then I married a medical student and realized that I would have to make more money. So I got a job as a home economist with the gas and electric company. and that was wonderful. It paid a 3-figure salary weekly. And then we moved to Brooklyn and had our first child, Paige, and then we went to Albany, New York. I got a job as a dietitian at Albany Hospital. And Albany was different from Brooklyn. We never saw the ground from Thanksgiving to April. And the length of their summer is the month of August. And that was a long, cold year. And then we went on to Atlanta. We lived in downtown Atlanta, right across from the hospital, which had an old building that they made into old apartments. And we lived at the end of the second floor, and we had a living room which had a fold-out couch, a television, a little tiny kitchen that had a washer and dryer in it, and a fairly good-sized bedroom that we gave to the 2 children because I had a son down there. And that was the extent of our living. And it was crowded. And then went to Northeast Fort Lauderdale, which at that time there were no traffic lights on Federal Highway. There were very few street lights on Federal Highway. There was no retail business except Sears. There were no fast food places. And that's all there was.
Then I sort of drifted away into high adventure, and went to California and worked for the Caterpillar dealer in Sacramento, and then later the Caterpillar dealer in San Leandro, and then later the Caterpillar dealer in Brentwood, and then I came east and went with John Deere in Baltimore. But then after that, I went to New York. Well, that was something else because I had so much Ronsford in me. It was very hard to phase out of it. And I was coming back to my apartment, which is just off Central Park, and the sun was starting to come up over South Central Park, and I had this glowing feeling that I was able to make New York into the same size of Ronsford, and that I, knew everybody and we're all good friends and neighbors. Quite a feeling. I went up there and found a job with Western Union at its headquarters as what amounted to an engineering rep, and I was in the government contracts division. And at the time, we had the largest communication system in the world that we set up for the Army and its inventory. We had a thing that if the Ruskies had dropped the atomic bomb, we had sensors out around each city and in a central control box that would tell you, like, if these sensors came on in New York, that meant New York was gone, or Chicago, or whatever. So I stayed there a while and then got laid off, and I went with New York Light. The same person that set up the blind date told me that Liz was divorced and was visiting in Lewisburg. So I went out and I don't know whether I bought it on the spot, but I bought this old junk Plymouth, and it turned out that it was supposed to stay junk, but the unscrupulous dealer let me have it. And then I drove down to Baltimore, and my uncle was a car dealer there, and he went over a little bit and said, "Now I think you're safe to drive to West Virginia." And I came down here, and Liz was sitting out there on the patio with her parents, and we started a romance again.
And we fell in love. Nice, beautiful love.
Obviously, I was not comfortable with the thought of raising 2 stepchildren in Manhattan, and And this was, and Liz, I don't think would have been either. So we chose Greenbrier County.
After we moved in and settled in our rented home, I went to work for Scott down at his New York Life office in Ronceverte. We got along very well until everything became very critical. Every situation was critical. We had to do this right now, or we had to do this one right now, or we had to do this one right now. But they all three needed to be done.
Liz is a planner, a highly organized person. I've always been by myself, mainly because I didn't get along with authority figures, and I recognized that.
So we had some slight words over the procedure, and after we worked out the fact that my procedure wasn't his procedure, I went for another job. I never heard anything from him that he missed me or that the office wasn't the same or it didn't look the same. And then one day, about 2 or 3 months later, I walked into the office and I thought, it does look the same. There's papers all over everything, and there's a couple open books here. And now where is the telephone? So he was right. It looked the same.
I had the perfect director in being a father. I couldn't understand, like Paige say, Scott, I need a pencil from the Dollar General, or I need a pink pearl eraser or something. And my immediate reaction to that was, well, go get it. Just take your dime and go get it. But I went, and, kicking and screaming, I went, and I came to realize that spelled love to Paige. It took a long time for that to happen, but Liz would encourage me in all those things.
Scott went to football, basketball games, and he ate dinners at 4:30 and 5 o'clock, and then would drive to Marlington or someplace with the team. But he was very faithful in all attending everything the kids were in. He and Walker had a really hard time with the ballet recitals, but they did it. They did it.
She was the true leader of the family, and what the family has become, I would give her most of the credit.
We had 2 teenagers, and there was a real need for them to be in a church, and David Jones had just gotten out of seminary, and they had a group of young people at St. James at that time, and it was a good place for them.
Here I am, I have probably been in Episcopal Church 6 months, and the bishop says, okay, Scott, you're preaching in the morning. I got up about 5 o'clock, went out to the cornfield and preached to the cornfield. So I got in there and preached that day.
And he helped David do services in Marlington, Hinton, Ronceverte, White Sulphur, Big Draft.
She was the spark plug that got the Merchants Association going. She had an antique shop then.
I had during high school, worked at Leggett's, and I liked it. I really enjoyed meeting people and selling them something that they wanted or they needed. And so in the 2 side rooms of our house that looked on Randolph Street, we opened a little antique shop. My partner was Kit Humphreys. This was at the time there were loads of people at the Greenbrier who had an exceedingly great amount of money. And we just did very well. So we decided we'd make the big move across town, across 2 streets and over into the community building. When we opened the store downtown, there were 35 viable businesses, but there was no organization. So I got together with some of them and got a little merchants group going. And it brought the community together downtown, and it really helped the retailing business. And it just united the little community. And it was about that time that Walmart came. And we lost 23 viable businesses from down the street, right off Washington Street. And at that time, then the little merchants thing went down to about nothing. And now it's once again very, very active because everything's viable on Washington Street now.
And she's very civic-minded with the historic district. Liz is very active in the Lewisburg Foundation, the battlefield, marking that. Very active in the garden clubs.
Then she got on the city council, got very involved in that. And she's so modest and unassuming. You know, a lot of things that she did, I don't even know, you know, because she went on and did them. On the other hand, I was out there from the top of Pocahontas County to the bottom of Monroe County trying to sell insurance. So I was away a lot of the time.
I can remember the afternoon I said, you know, I think I'm just going to go down there and sign up and run. Nobody asked me to. And I just said, I think I'm going to run. And I did run because there were things that I saw that needed to be attended to. It was very, very good to have a downtown merchant on the council. There's a great privilege in life for a woman to be able to work and still have control of her time and of her life and do with it the things that are meaningful for her, but are meaningful for the community also.
When Greenbrier East got built about the time I came back, they didn't have really any football stadium. So there was Charles Booth, a former superintendent, and Roy Kaufman, a former principal, had just retired. They got this Spartan Boosters thing started. And I got on board that and then did the publicity. And there were a lot of people came out of the bushes on that, but the guys that were the true spark plugs were these two retired principals and superintendents. They were wonderful.
We had a good life here. The children have had everything they possibly could need to be educated, and they traveled with their father, so they've seen the world. I just couldn't wish for a better place for anybody to raise their kids. We both have a feeling of that participating in life in a community means giving back and giving of yourself and being of service to people. Just like God expects us to be of service to people all the while.
We have a chicken shack, you know, at the state fair. That's Rotary's big project, and Mitch is always there.
I was sort of weaned on Rotary. My dad was a charter member of the Ronsford Club. I would come home for Christmas, and it was never Christmas until I went down to the armory and helped fill those stockings. So when I came home after marrying Liz, well, then I immediately joined the club and later became president and integrated the club. This caused quite a furor, and changed the meeting time from 6:30 in the evening to noon. And those were controversial days, but happily I had Lewisburg to escape to. And
hi there! What a wonderful time for you to drop by. You know, they're just setting up to shoot a scene of our new star, and I'd love to introduce you before they begin. Honestly, we're all just bursting with excitement about this brilliant new performer. We think this one will not only win every award hands down, but it's just going to win the hearts of people all over the country. Come on now. I want you to meet a great new star.
Are you drawing breath, son?
Baldwin. We were sold.
What's your name?
Well, she was Purcell.
Kin to Nimrod Purcell?
His daddy's uncle.
Say some Baldwin agents took you?
From behind.
None of them Purcells ever was too bright. Grab his ankles, missus, and mind your dress. He's a bleeding like a stuck pig.
That scene, which was, on the screen, is probably 2 minutes. Took 2 hours to shoot. Yeah. And that was quite an illumination,
Howdy. I'm Mitch Scott, and I want to tell you a story. Hello. I'm Mitch Scott, and I want to tell you a story. Hello. Hello. I'm Mitch Scott, and I want to tell you a story. Howdy. There. No, I can get comfortable. I'm just not used to it. Howdy. I'm Mitch Scott, and I want to tell you a story. And I'm going to try to go a little slower, because I think I struggle trying to, go too fast and, yeah. Okay. You ready to go again? Howdy. I'm Mitch Scott, and I want to tell you a story.
And it just seemed to be a unmitigated ham. And I get the biggest kick out of, stand up and tell the story, a joke or whatever. And
For me to go to performance and see how much pleasure he brings to other people because of what he can do, that's just a real gift.
Cemetery Hill is the highest point on this side of the river. The river runs right down there. When I was a boy, I used to come up here and sit for hours.
Mitch, of course, has been very active in the theater. I love to see him on stage.
Sim sit with me sometimes.
He says he's a born ham. Yes.
I'd say, Sims!
He's able to love and see certain things in life that mean so much to him, and he likes to share that with people. He loves his country. He loved the Air Force.
He felt that all the Greenbrier County men that died while in the armed forces during the 20th century wars should be remembered. And then when the monument was put up, it was apparent to both Mitch and myself that it was incomplete.
one day I realized that my next door neighbor right across the street was not on the monument. He didn't qualify because he couldn't prove nativity in Greenbrier County. So I didn't stop. I just kept chipping away and chipping away and chipping away. So we defined this guy as being a Ronceverdian. That was one example of what we got on there eventually. I give an enormous amount of credit to John McElhaney. He is a terrific military historian. In my opinion, he's on a level with Churchill.
And he says, "You were behind me all the way." I said, "You're right, I was behind you."
As a result of all this interaction between the VA, the VFW, American Legion, interested people that were kin and cousins and aunts and uncles, through that media, a total of 51 names were added instead of one.
He just wanted to see that these men were treated by their country the way they should have been treated, that they died with the presence of everybody's prayers, and that they were heroes.
I love the people and their friendliness and their character, and people like Charlie Mundy. So we live in as close to almost heaven, I think, as you can get.
He's touched every part of my life. He has loved our children and our grandchildren. And he's never said no to anything that was needed in the family.
She lends enormous stability to wherever she is, and especially here at the home. And she invariably thinks about the other person first, which drives me nuts because I was an only child and I wasn't used to doing that. But she does, and I've come to respect it very highly.
Scott is my anchor. He leads me forward sometimes, and he leads me backward sometimes, but I'm always anchored to that I know he's there, and that's the anchor in my life.
We respected each other, and we still have our difference of opinion because we're both very strong-minded people. I'm very stubborn, and she's not near as stubborn as I am, but she's vastly smarter.
You get a relationship going between God and your husband and a wife, and things work out very well.
As self-destructive as I am, and taking chances, I probably wouldn't be here today without Liz.
Ooh, I gotta go.
Have I told you lately when I'm sleeping? Every dream I dream is you somehow. Have I told you who I'd like to share my love forever? Well, darling, I'm telling you now.
This heart would break in two if you refuse me. I'm no good without you anyhow.
Dear,